Today we're going to be making a multimedia silhouette postcard that you can send, and it might end up looking something like this or something like this. And so these are the supplies that you're going to be needing. I've got multiple different colors of cardstock, and they are cut in quarters from an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock. So they are about 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So I've got the variety of colors here for the top, and then some plain white cardstock cut to the same size for the bottom of them. I've got a cutting mat, an X-acto knife and scissors, pencil, glue, eraser, some old magazines, and a scrap piece of paper, which you're going to need later on. What I want to start out with are these multicolored pieces of cardstock, because I want to figure out first what shape I'm going to be doing, and then I'm going to come in and then pick out the colors I'm going to be using underneath that shape. So I've already cut out a few different shapes here. I've got a flower, a pineapple, and a star. And you can look online. It's kind of fun to look at like silhouette shapes or different types of shapes. You can do a heart, you can do, you know, I did a little fish for this one. I did a popsicle here. So you can do lots of different shapes. I also like to keep the part that I cut out, because that can be used for another project, or it can be used, you know, to trace around if you want to make multiples. And you can see in the back that I just kind of sketched these onto the paper, cut them out, and flipped them over. On this one here, just to show you my process, I sketched out, it's kind of hard to see, I sketched out a tulip tree leaf. I love those, that leaf shape. And so, like I said, if you don't have an X-acto knife, you can use scissors. You can kind of fold it in the middle, cut into it, and then cut around the edges. And that's, these are my paper only scissors. I'm very specific about that, so I get nice straight edges, clean edges. But for this one, I'm going to use my X-acto blade. And while I'm cutting this, I can tell you a quick story as a word of warning. When I teach young students especially, I always tell them to make sure that they do not look away while they are cutting. And I have always said this, and then one summer, a few years back, I was teaching a summer camp, and the students were all working, and I was busy cutting some things out for them. And a student walked up to me to ask me a question, and I was kind of going like this. I was about here when he came up, and when I turned to look at him, looked away from where I was cutting, and sliced off part of this finger right here. So after some time in the ER and several weeks of healing, my finger is okay, thankfully. But I can now tell people I am officially an amputee. It's the tiniest little part of my finger I could have amputated, but it's because I looked away while I was cutting with an X-acto blade. So there's your word of warning. Don't look away when you're cutting with the silhouette, and then try to keep your hand behind where you're cutting so that it's not, you don't risk slicing into your hand. I like to have a very sharp X-acto blade because it will just cut better and cleaner. So that also means it'll cut your hand really well. So be very careful with that. So if you don't feel comfortable with an X-acto blade, like I said, you can do scissors. Just cut into the middle and cut around the outside of your lines. You can also just cut right into it and then just kind of tape that part together later. So that pops right out. Make sure I cover my blade when I'm done. I'm going to flip that over, and then there's my tulip tree leaf, and I have my little extra part that I can save for later. So now that I have these different shapes, I can kind of decide what shape I want to do. You can see I used black before, and some of mine, that makes for some nice silhouettes too. For this one though, I really wanted to do something a little bit brighter, and you can decide what colors you're going to cut out of the magazine based on what the shape is. So for the popsicle, I wanted, you know, bright, nice warm colors, and you can see there are even like some fruits in there. There's like a little bit like pieces of an orange and carrots and an apple, some flowers. So I wanted to have that in, you know, because it's food based. And then with the fish, more earth tones, yellows, greens, browns, a little bit of blue, even some fish scale in there for my fish. So So this is going to kind of tell me what I want to do, what colors I want to cut out of my magazines. So it's also going to determine how much I need. I won't need strips at the top and the bottom. I can you know, leave that part out because it's not going to show up. So looking at my different shapes, I think I'm going to pick my tulip tree leaf first, and I'm going to look for some greens, and then maybe I'll take a look for my pineapple. I'll look for some different colors for that too. And when you're looking through these magazines, there are all kinds of, I mean, just all kinds of beautiful colors that you can pick out. You can get some weird textures, weird shapes, and stuff like that. So flip through your magazines and see what you can find, and that's going to really help you in doing your finished piece, is to really look for different kinds of textures, different kinds of shapes that will go along with each shape. Now that I have all my pieces cut, or at least most of my pieces cut, I want to start laying them out how I want them, where I want them. And I have my pieces of white cardstock now. I'm going to start with this one here. And like I said, I don't need to cover the whole thing necessarily, because parts of it will be covered up with this. So one way you can kind of sneak and make it a little bit easier to know where you need it is to put your silhouette on top and then trace it onto your white cardstock, and then you'll know exactly where you need to put your pieces of colorful paper in the background. So now I've got this sort of outline here that I can use, and then I can start to lay these across. And since I won't need this whole long strip, I can cut or tear it and save that piece for someplace else. So I'm just going to go through now and kind of decide what colors I want where, cutting them down and placing them so that I can prepare for gluing them down. So I've got my pieces all, you know, cut or torn to size, and I found a couple extra yellows. As you may have noticed, it was harder to find yellows than I thought it was going to be. So I went through another magazine and found a couple of extras. I put this, you know, the piece from the National Geographic color in there, but it was such a stark contrast that I decided to go for something a little bit different. So I'm going to put that piece in there instead. Another thing that I think about when I'm doing this kind of thing is what the sort of the temperature of the color is. So while this here is a nice, like, kind of turquoisey green color, it was such a contrast to the other greens. I ended up not using much of this. I used a little bit of it, but I didn't use very much because I wanted to have this nice warm green here, and this was such a cool green color, bluish green. It didn't quite fit, so I'm going to just save that for later. I've got a little pile of saved over here. You should see my collection of just things that I keep in. I'm always keeping little scraps of things here and there because you never know when you might need it. And now is going to come the gluing, and I'm going to set this one aside for just a moment. I've got my scrap piece of paper here. I've got my glue stick. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to kind of shift these down just a little bit. And you can actually, even if it's easier, and I might do this, slide them right off. And I want to keep them in that order as much as possible because some of them are, you know, a specific size for this. So I'm going to start here at the top, and using this scrap of paper, or scrap piece of paper, I'm going to do my gluing on there. That way, as you can see, I went over the edge. It won't leave a mess on your table or your desk or anything. And then I'll just start gluing right at the top there. And then I'm just going to go down from there. I'm going to keep gluing them down. I don't know if you noticed in the video too, at one point I did this because I thought, oh, I can just put one piece there. But then I was like, no, I want to carry that pattern all the way down into the stem too, because it's just nice to keep that pattern going. So I'm going to glue all these down, and then I'll go from there. So now it's all glued down, and it's the moment of truth to see if everything is in the right place. So I just lay that over top of that, and you can see it looks really good. I like the way that looks. So now I'm gonna just flip this over onto my scrap paper. This glue is all dry, so that's good. I don't want to get the front all gluey. And I'm just gonna put a layer of glue on here. And glue sticks are best for this. I mean, if you have other types of glue, you can try that, but Elmer's glue will make it buckle. Rubber cement would work, something like that, but I think that glue sticks are the best bet for this step, just to keep it nice and flat. Line that up as best I can. Press it flat. And then if there are any edges that, you know, maybe overlap a little bit, you can always trim those down a little bit. And then I'm going to let this dry, squashed flat, like under a book or something, to make sure that it dries nice and flat. And then I'm going to work on this one, and then we'll do our finishing touches and details. Right, now that these are dry and they've sat under a book for a while, so they're pretty flat, I can put any finishing touches that I want to on there. I got a little bit of glue on there, but I'm not too worried about that. I can cover that up with a colored pencil, or I can use some pens to add some nice finishing touches, some details to this. You can always just leave them as is if you want to. You can also, if you're not going to send them in the mail, you could glue some string or put some glitter on them. You can do other things. You could cut out little pieces of your scraps and attach them on the outside of this as well. Lots of different things you can do. But if you are going to send it as a postcard, you don't want to do much more than anything that's going to stick up. Otherwise, you could put it inside of an envelope and mail it that way too. So with my pens, I can just do some little designs and patterns around my my silhouette that I did here. You can do all kinds of stuff. You can add little Zen doodles. You can write a message on this side. You can, if it's for a birthday or whatever occasion. And so you can do that kind of thing. Or you can, like I said, you can make it a little bit more colorful on this side if you want to, by using maybe some colored pencils. You can take a colored pencil and maybe Up here I can write aloha. And then color it in. You can use markers for this too if you want to. You can, you know, do it any way that you want. This part is easier to do once the glue has dried. The glue, when it's wet, can make it harder to write on top of there, so make sure it's nice and dry when you add your finishing touches. And then you can make it, you know, you can add other patterns and designs and things like that, and then flip it over, and then you can write your message, address it, and stick it in the mail. So I hope that you enjoyed doing this and that you'll do some of these at home, and that if you have any questions, please let me know. You can comment on this video or send me an email, and I hope you have a really fun time with this one.